So I'm happy to introduce our speaker, Piper Wilson. So Piper, you can go ahead and show your camera there. And Piper has been in the community industry for over 15 years now. And she's currently a strategic services consultant at Higher Logic. And she's an active member here within the CMX community. And hi, Piper, good to see you. And if you all didn't know, at CMX Summit, I had the privilege to moderate a panel with her about events. And this is where the conversation started about this CMX Masterclass. She's really passionate about community care and community health. And so we're so excited to hear what she has to say. So, Piper, I'm handing the mic off to you. Feel free to go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sujin. Um, let's see. I wanted to say something about myself. Like Sujin said, I've been in the community space for about 15 years now. Most of my time has been as a moderator, and for many years, I considered myself a community management groupie because I spent a lot of my time reading and studying and attending webinars and stuff. So I want to say that if you're not in a position yet where you think you're a community manager, just go for it because my first job, John Summers hired me. He's like, "You've got it. Just come on, get over yourself and let's go." So just just believe in yourself and go for it. That's my mother coming out giving unsolicited advice. So let me share my screen and we will get started. I will be taking, if there's questions in the middle of it, I can see the chat. Um, so I will try to take questions during it if I can, but I don't make any promises either. So, also, real quick, I think my dad is here. So everybody behave. Um, so here's the deal with the class. I want everyone to feel like they've gotten their money's worth out of this class. Just forget that the class is free for a moment. And I want you to pick one thing out of everything we talk about today to change or do differently. If you can do that, just one thing, you're going to stand a better chance of carrying through on it. Let's see. Slide 2. There we go. This class is not about self-care. There are books, podcasts, uh, there are, I'm sorry, I got a distraction there. There are books, podcasts, blogs, and webinars devoted to self-care. And if you need to know just about self-care, you need to go find one of those. The good news is that community care does contribute to self-care. This class is about taking care of your community. However, you can care for your community in ways that also take care of you. It's a bonus. Our communities are alive. We know this because we use terms from the life sciences to talk about them. We talk about how communities develop, grow, and sometimes they die. We develop them and nurture them and cultivate them. And sometimes they grow so large and complex that they produce new communities. A teammate of mine recently compared online communities with gardens. A gardener fertilizes the plants, chooses the locations, plants the seeds, and if the weather cooperates, they eventually have plants. Community managers do the same things for their communities. They nurture the product, they choose the tech, and they identify their vision and the purpose. Both community managers and gardeners need to wait a long time before they see the fruit of their labors. Both types of gardens require repetitive and sometimes boring tasks. For example, gardeners prune, weed, water daily. Community managers sometimes delete spam daily. They develop programs, they nurture their communities, and they participate in their communities. The repetitive stuff of a community will always be there. Reframing those tasks into a ritual is what makes those tasks into a source of renewal and energy rather than monotonous chores. Before I continue, I want to take a moment to define the difference between a ritual and a routine. A routine is a series of actions regularly followed. It's a fixed program. You can think of a figure skater going through their routine. I can't even think of another way to say it. A ritual, like a routine, is a series of actions regularly followed, but it elevates your awareness of what is unique or sacred. Now, a really good example of comparing these things is bathing. Often, bathing is a routine. It's when you do it daily, you get in the shower, you wash your body, you wash your hair if you have hair, and then you rinse off and get out. It's just something you do. However, if you have set aside time once a week or once a month and you make sure that no one's going to disturb you, you use scented oils or candles, you have a bubbles, you read a book and make sure your phone is off, that's a ritual. So I'm going to start talking about self-care when it comes to community care. I used to be a soap and water kind of gal, and I never worried about makeup. Then I got my first community manager job, and I started having meetings on camera. I didn't like the way I looked on camera because of that. I just looked washed out, I thought. So I decided to start wearing makeup. The problem was that I didn't know anything about wearing makeup. My mother was a hippie, and makeup wasn't a priority in our household. Right after high school, I joined the Marine Corps. Now, believe it or not, in Marine Corps boot camp, we had classes on makeup. But what they taught us was to use eyeshadow that was the same color as our eye color and to use red lipstick. I don't know if you can see very well, but my eye color is dark brown. So I had dark brown eyeshadow plastered on my face and bright red lipstick. It was not all that attractive. We were required to wear that while we were in boot camp, but once boot camp was done, I was done with the makeup. And then after Marine Corps, I was an air traffic controller. And pilots don't see air traffic controllers. And I was in a radar room, which was dark, and so I didn't really care about what I looked like in there as much either. So when I tried setting up makeup with for my meetings after I got hired as a community manager, I looked like a clown because I didn't know what I was doing. That's what I thought anyway. So I hired someone to teach me how to do it. Thank you, Kitty Calhoun. So what I learned the most was that the most important thing about wearing makeup is taking care of your skin, because makeup on skin that doesn't look good the makeup doesn't look good either. Then, let me make sure I'm on the right slide. Yes. I'm sorry. So I took what I learned from Kitty Calhoun, the best makeup teacher ever, and I started doing the routine, and I was leaning over the sink, and it was boring because I couldn't listen to music or anything because my bathroom was connected to the bedroom and it would have woken up my partner. And I was only doing it because I said I would, not because I wanted to do it. I actually hated it. I was uncomfortable and cold, and I was frustrated because I was learning it new. I think it's interesting to note that I didn't set out to make things a ritual. It just kind of happened because I was trying to do things to make myself less uncomfortable. One day, after I was working on all this, I kind of woke up and I was centered and calm. And I was floored because it was obvious to me that my routine had become a ritual. It was magic. Now, the thing is that magic is an experience that we have that we don't have an explanation for. So, I want to explore the explanation of how I got that ritual. Here's how I took my routine and made it a ritual. Instinctively, I was bringing things in that brought me comfort. I took my great grandmother's secretary desk and I placed it in a room that had nothing to do with makeup. It was a guest bedroom. And I set up not soft lights, bright lights that were warm and made me feel good and that I could see to do what I was doing. And I had a soft chair. Then I started listening to In Before the Lot podcast and audiobooks. I have now listened to the Harry Potter series of audiobooks about 50 gazillion times. I was dressing up the routine with things that made things better. I also started planning the morning out so that I had extra time because I realized that part of the reason that I was so uncomfortable was that I felt rushed. And I felt rushed because I was hungry. I had been trying to do all these things before I ate breakfast, and that wasn't working. So I ate breakfast first, and then I did these things, and it became better. These things made the experience more pleasant and upped the ante to make the time more sacred. I was going through my ritual one morning when I recognized the parallels between self-care and community care. I realized that without the sanctity of the ritual of around doing my makeup, I probably wouldn't be doing it anymore. It would be like a diet. It would just be something that I was forcing myself to do, and after a while, I wouldn't be able to keep up with it anymore. The I find the same is true in my work as a community manager. When I don't have a sense of the sacred or the specialness, work becomes a grinding slog and it's hard to keep doing it. And it can be just something that you're holding your nose to the grindstone for. And I realized that I wasn't the only one that felt that way. I just couldn't be. And it turns out that I was right. I surveyed several community managers several months ago to see how they currently felt about the tasks that they're doing now. And this is what we came up with. Most of us are feeling emotions that have negative connotations. They've got dread and pressure and fear, anxiety. It's not all a bed of thorns. There's happy things too. We feel valued and helpful. What I found interesting was why I put that word in red. I made that up there. No one said they felt muddled. That was just me. They felt everything. They felt all these things. Some people said they felt bland. Others were valued and helpful while they were overwhelmed at the same time. And I want to point out that I didn't offer these things as drop-down boxes. This is all free form. So several people said they were overwhelmed. That's why it's bigger. Then I thought that it wasn't always this way for me, so it couldn't always be this way for others. So I also asked them about how they felt about community management when they started. And those who answered were uniformly positive about their experience when they started. There's nothing muddled in this word cloud. This is how we used to feel. Now, some of the outlook change from this slide from back then until now can be expected because people feel different from the beginning of their journey to the present. It always happens. For example, if you are going to take a trip from New York City to the Grand Canyon, you start off excited, rocking, bebopping, and just all set to go see the Grand Canyon. 2 or 3 days into the trip, you're still excited about seeing the Grand Canyon, but you are uncomfortable in the car, tired of gas stations and hotels. There's just no way around it. So it was true that my respondents shared a lot of the negative emotions while they still shared the positive emotions that I had come to feel at times too. So, what can we do about all this? Come on, slide advance. One of the things that we can do is what we're talking about today. We're going to create a ritual around our community work. When we plan it right, the community care rituals we perform day in and day out will bring us back to where we started and why we started the journey. It will also allow us to feel connected with the members of our community. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to build a ritual for your community so that you can have more than a routine to follow. Routines are helpful tools, but they don't elevate your awareness or sustain your community more. There are two overarching goals. One is to get back to the emotions of where we started, and the second is to enhance our ability to keep our communities vibrant. We want our time in the community to be fulfilling as much as possible. When we start using rituals in our work, we are taking care of the community and ourselves. Rituals are everywhere. They're not just in churches or the changing of the guard or temples. For example, people create rituals to help themselves get through the day for various things. Actors and athletes do them before they take the stage or take the field. For example, Keith Richards, the guitarist for the Rolling Stones, eats shepherd's pie before every performance. Serena Williams still wears the same socks every time she plays tennis. Now, this is something I can't understand. If anyone can explain to me how she manages to wear the same socks without wearing them out, I'm interested to know. And finally, Michael Jordan wears the same shorts or wore the same shorts from his college days at UNC Chapel Hill under his Chicago Bulls shorts while he was playing professionally basketball. I messed this up when I was rehearsing and I said football, and my partner laughed really hard. So, everyone in North Carolina, you can thank me for getting the right college um, in there too. I managed to do it right. I found an article from Scientific American that said performing rituals with the intention of producing a certain result appears to be sufficient for that result to come true. So that means that when we create a ritual to get us back to where we started and to sustain and make our community more vibrant, it's going to happen just because we started it. In fact, sociologists also found that the rituals that we create can also alleviate negative emotions like fear, dread, grief, and anxiety. Remember those slides from a few ways back? That's where these things come from. The That's what these rituals are also going to affect. They're going to help those things go away. So, how do we create? What's the first step of creating a ritual? The first thing you do is create a list of everything you do. Richard Millington, in his research over decades of working with community managers, found that each week community managers generally work on 15 different, unique, and usually complex tasks every day. Here is a list, a snapshot of one community manager's tasks from one week. Some of these tasks lend themselves to rituals. I'm thinking specifically of the writing the weekly newsletter. That's something you can do on a daily basis, and at the end of the week or the beginning of the week, send it out. The other things that don't lend themselves to rituals is the attending meetings. You just can't make that a ritual because it depends too much on the topic at hand and what other people do. Now, Richard's article talks about how to take this list and concentrate on the things that are going to gain maximum impact. He's talking about things. We are talking about one thing to focus on and doesn't take up a big chunk of time. Now, we're going to go through the steps to create a ritual. First, you make a list of your tasks similar to Richard's client, and you decide what your community needs. Here are some general guidelines for what you need to do. You want to choose something that is done solely by you. No teamwork for this one, just you. You want something that's going to make your job more sustainable and less of a burden. Simply, you're trying to make your job easier. If possible, you want it to be something that brings you joy or plays to your strengths. And most importantly, it needs to be done in about 15 to 30 minutes. Excuse me. I recommend starting with something in the community itself. Excuse me. You have to remember to unmute after you don't cough in people's ears. I recommend starting with something in the community because doing something tangential, like monitoring social media or responding to emails, may not be as effective. And then the last thing you do here is add it to your calendar. Make an appointment with yourself and honor that appointment. Don't double up with anything, like don't eat breakfast while you're doing this ritual. Don't eat lunch or anything like that. This is just for you. And the last thing is to make sure that you are refocusing something on your list. You're not making a new thing to add to your workload. So, to review, you're going to make a list. You're going to make a choice, and you're going to add the choice to your calendar. If you find that you are consistently going over your 15 to 30 minutes that you've allotted for this ritual, you need to either add more time to your calendar or reconsider your choice, because you don't want to make this longer because you don't want, I mean, you can make this longer if it helps, but if you can't make it something useful within that short chunk of time, it may not be the right thing. Now, unless your task has a natural ending, like reviewing a number of threads, a specific number of threads in a group, or sending out a specific number of emails, you want to set a timer to let you know when it's time to be done. And when that timer goes off, you need to stop. That's just it. Now, as far as scheduling goes, and when you add the choice to your calendar, I recommend doing it first thing in the morning before you check your emails. That way you don't have to worry about anything getting lost due to meetings or an emergency that comes up. You got to remember, emergencies aren't real until you open up your email and read about it. It's important to build a transition to your ritual to make sure that you've got something that makes your ritual stand apart from just focus time. It's basically you're going to book. You can take a quick walk. You can have a few minutes of meditation or take a few deep breaths, or you can ring a gong like this. I tried to get a real gong, but it wouldn't be here in time, so you get the little dingy thing. So you use the bookend activity, and then you start the task, then you do the thing. Then at the end, you mark the end of the task, however you want to do that, and then you do the little bookend thing. And then you honor the fact that you've done what you set out to do. Finally, and this is my favorite part, you're going to push the dopamine button. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that links to the reward center of the brain. Whenever you push the button, your body wants more. So the next day, when you do your ritual and you press the dopamine button again, you're going to want to do it again. It helps keep the ritual habit going. So, at the end of your ritual, give yourself a reward. Pat yourself on the back, Um, put a gold star on a calendar so you can see your progress. Eat a piece of chocolate. That's what I do. Uh, or do whatever catches your fancy. And then do it again and again and again. Because this is hard work, folks. That's something that I haven't brought up yet. This is what it looks like when you start. Advanced slide. There you go. This is stupid hard work when you start out. Remember my routine when I started with the ritual? It was hard. I hated it. I was uncomfortable. I can't tell you how long it's going to take before it stops being hard. It's going to be hard. That's okay. You're going to push the dopamine button when you're done, and the next time it may not be as hard. It may take a week or two before it stops being hard, but if you keep on pushing that dopamine button, it's going to get better. And dopamine buttons are important. Oops, we can't go back. Oh well. So here is what it looks like for me. This is just like a fast forward of it. All right, so I'm going to start my ritual. Here's my bookend. Beginning of the task. Do the task. This is frustrating. Timer goes off. End of task. And then dopamine button. Woo! End. That's what it looks like. Maybe it's going to take 15 minutes for that. Probably not that fast, but it might be that frustrating. I have one more thing before I move on to practical things again. I want you to find out what works for you. And remember that what works for you may not be the most practical and efficient course of action. I know I have a couple of friends, Raven and Joshua, and they hang their laundry out to dry on the line. Raven always takes the laundry out the front door and walks all the way around the back of the house to the clothesline. Joshua finally asked him one day, "Why do you do that? Why don't you just go straight to the clothesline?" And Raven answered, "Because I hate hanging laundry on the line. So I always walk through the herb garden on the way to motivate me." So Raven is doing the dopamine button at the beginning. That's how Raven makes it work. A ritual and a routine can achieve the same material results, but a dedicated community ritual nurtures your community. Here are some routines that I have seen community managers do that I consider successful and can be converted into a ritual. Community managers who check in with their volunteers and advocates on a regular basis. David Spinks expanded on this idea in several weeks ago. I saw it on LinkedIn. And he said that you send a kind message with no asks. And this part of no asks is really important because you can send a kind message with an ask, with a call to action, and that kind of, it can be irritating or obligate the recipient. And that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to establish a connection and be good to the community. So resist that urge. That's not the point. The point is the ritual. I'm sorry I'm having so much trouble with the slide advancement. The next thing that some people do is look for opportunities to create meaningful engagement. For the purpose of this class, I'm going to define meaningful engagement as something that makes a community member feel seen and heard. If possible, the community manager is not doing most of the posting in the community. They're not driving the bus, they're guiding the driver, and the drivers are the community members. One way to guide the driver is to connect with a member privately and ask them and say, here's a question that I think you can answer. Do you want to go take a look and see what you can do? And finally, some of them perform a series of actions on a daily basis. Now, these can be things that you do every day. Oh, I said that. When you, depending on the size of your community, you can do a bunch of these things as one ritual. But if you have a really large community and really busy, you may only be able to do one. So here's some things that they do. You can review the spam and moderation queue every day for 15 to 30 minutes. You could send messages to members. You can read threads and maybe respond to them. You can watch for patterns of behavior to identify people that are really doing a good job and maybe think of them as potential advocates and super users down the road. Or you can identify, this is less exciting, you can identify people that may not be as good and not be behaving well in your community. Now, this last thing I'm going to talk about isn't a ritual thing, but it does come from self-care. It's important and valuable, so it does need to be scheduled on your calendar, and it does need to be done. And I want you to check in and see how the community is going. And you do this with a couple of asks. The first one is to ask, who am I serving and how are they changing? The first thing to think about is that the people who join your community early on may not be the same type of personas that join your community later. So you have to know who and what, for example, are joining your community. The second thing to remember here is that the reason that people join a community is not necessarily the same reasons as people stay in a community. So again, you need to keep an eye on who and what is there so that you can make sure that you're taking care of the needs of your community. The next thing I want you to do as you do this check-in is identify the purpose of your community and how it's changing. We talked earlier about how communities are alive and how they evolve. You need to keep your finger on the pulse of the community so you can know if it's changing. And if it's changing, you need to decide whether or not you like the way it's going, or if you need a course correction to get back to the way it was. It's just really important to know where it's going. The last thing that I want to cover here is what to do when your job description doesn't include community participation. And this can be for directors of community, for example, people that have a team that works in the community for themselves. I say do it anyway. I say connect anyway, because you likely got into this field for the connection with other people. So connect anyway. Reach out to people in the community. Answer threads if that's not going to undermine your community team. If that does undermine your team, reach out privately to people. And just like in the previous slide, you can reach out and ask them to participate, or you can just reach out with a kind ask. The point is to stay connected with the members and keep your pulse on the community. Okay, so to recap on the ritual, you're going to pick a routine to turn into a ritual. You're going to schedule a time to do that ritual. Then you're going to do the thing. Then you're going to press the dopamine button. And then slam it hard every day and every day again after that. Anything can be a ritual. And with the proper preparation, you can get through the hard part and make it count for the health of your community. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Piper. That was super insightful. I see in the chat that people loved hearing just tips and tricks and just how we can be more sustainable in the long run and maintaining community health. So we're going to go ahead and take some questions. We have some in the Q&A tab already, but feel free to go ahead and submit your questions over there. And I'll go ahead and start with the first question, Piper. So Amir Ali is asking, how can we add more rituals to our community?
How do you add more? I think it's important to make sure that you have one established before you add more. That's that's really critical. Don't worry about more until you have one and then two. And I think that the rituals that you need will become obvious as you go along. Like I'd say in the community, my favorite idea to interact to nurture the community would be to reach out with kind messages. Once I have that established for me and my team and start seeing the results of that, I may move into public participation. Actually, reverse that. I think public participation would be most important, and then reaching out individually. But I want to make sure that you have the public thing taken care of and established and moving along nicely before you start doing the other one.
And in terms of, overseeing a community, because it can be a small community, it can be a large community, and you showed in your word cloud that a lot of CMs feel overwhelmed, and maybe it's because of the number of people that are involved. So for 15 or 30 minutes, what is that something that you would do in the past, or do you have an example of, I'm reaching out to this many people today and this many people tomorrow? Is there an example of a routine that you had in the past that you could share with us?
I'm afraid not, because I didn't come up with this until after I was out of dealing with the community. I
Mm.
I was dealing. I realized all this when I was working for Higher Logic, and I don't work with individual communities anymore.
I see.
I'm working with strategy and helping other communities do their
Mm,
thing.
mm. So next question is, one's asking, how do we deal with cynical remarks? And sometimes it's upsetting to see members get snarky or impolite. How do you deal with that, or how do you move forward with that?
Oh, yikes. Um, that's a hard one. Um, I try to deal with it directly and don't let it go, because it's one of those. I try to not say, oh, well, he could mean this, or she could have meant that, that may not be so negative. I would go ahead and address it and I would address it privately, um,
Mhm.
and advise people not to do it anymore. And if they kept on, I would go ahead and start deleting and warning,
Mm,
because that type of behavior is toxic and it's catching, and you want to make sure that you nip it in the bud.
mhm.
Going back to that gardening analogy.
Yes. Yeah, so we only see the tip of the iceberg a lot of the time, right, with people's reactions and things like that. So,
Hmm.
um, all right. One is Ali is asking, sometimes stress um, and overwhelming feelings take over in her job, and her rituals start to fade away. And it's so hard to get back to them. So, what do you suggest to get back? Like, how do you get back to those rituals when you've lost them?
You get back to them by honoring the schedule. Um, you just, if you have to do it, like, it's hard for me because one of the first things I want to do in the morning is pick up my phone and read the emails.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm working on that. I'm really, really working
I'm
on
guilty of
not
that
doing
too.
that. Yeah. Um, and you make that appointment and you get in there and just do it. I wish I had a better answer than just do it.
Yeah,
I'm
we're not gonna
sorry.
feel like we want to do it all the time. It's just doing it,
Right.
right? Like fighting that.
Right. Mhm. It's
Yeah.
like that guy with the thing on his back, it's hard. Make sure you have plenty of chocolate. Um, that I guess that's what I would do. Make sure you've got plenty of chocolate around.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, and then we have Gerardo asking, how well established does the community have to be before you can effectively start to implement rituals?
I don't think it has to be well established at all. I think you start doing it as soon as you can.
Mhm. There's no high threshold to starting community care rituals.
Right. You
Yeah,
you start, I think the earlier you start, the better you are.
I
Better
think so
off you are.
too. Yeah, I mean, if in one sense, maybe the more established it is, maybe it might be even harder to establish
Mhm.
rituals because there are more things that are set up to do. But
Right.
that's an interesting question.
Yeah, it is. And I think that oh, I lost that thought. I do think something and it's important, but it's gone. I have ADHD, sorry folks, it's gone.
When it comes up, you can just jump in.
Yeah.
All right, we have V asking, how would you go about getting exec level buy-in to dedicate more time on community rituals? Or how can you prove the value of community rituals to higher ups so they know why you need to spend this amount of time on them each week?
Um, I don't think you need to. I think taking 15 to 30 minutes a day, unless you're being micromanaged for every minute, um, is something that you can do on your own time. Especially if you're just going to take 15 minutes.
Hmm.
And that is completely legit. Um, you know, 15-minute ritual is just as legit as a 30-minute ritual. Um, don't try to push yourself. Do what you do what you can. Um, and if you can't give 30 minutes, don't worry about it. I had in a parenting class once, one of the things I loved the most was you cannot give what you do not have. So if all you've got is 15 minutes to give it and be done.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Just of the last opportunity to submit any questions. But this has been really, really helpful, especially as we're ending the year, Piper. I think this topic is so relevant, as I'm sure many people are feeling the slump or they're feeling burnout, and in terms of managing and caring for their communities, it can be really hard. Um, but if there aren't any other last questions, we can end it here. But let's go ahead and just give Piper a round of applause through whether it's your chat or emojis. Thank you so much, Piper, for giving your time and your wisdom. I think
Thank you,
it was
Jill.
so needed as we close the year. And I'm going to go ahead and announce that CMX, we are hosting an end of the year celebration, and I'm happy to share that with you. We're going to be hearing from a really great panel of leaders in the community and hear about their victories, their lessons learned, and what they're expecting in 2023 in terms of trends. So you can go ahead and RSVP, or I'll enter that link in the chat. But again, once again, Piper, I'm so glad we had this opportunity to highlight your wisdom with the community, and it was so
Oh,
needed. So
oh, thank you.
yes, is there anything you want to say to anyone tuning in from all around the world?
If that really is my dad, I love you. Um,
Yes.
I just don't know. I mean, because um, my dad generally goes by his middle name, and what I see in the chat is the first and last name, so it might be him, it might be someone else.
Okay.
So it's like if my dad, hi.
Yeah, that's sweet. Well, you'll
Yeah.
see it on the recording. So everyone, please look out for the recording, which will be sent out either today or tomorrow as it's made available. So we'll see you at the next one. We'll see you at the year-end celebration, and I hope to see you then. So have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.